I came home a day early. The door was unlocked. That was the first sign something was wrong. Amanda always locked it. She double-checked it. She used to joke about my paranoia when I triple-checked it myself. But that day, it was open. Slightly ajar. Like someone was expecting me. Or didn't care anymore. I stepped inside. The house was dark except for a sliver of light leaking from under the bedroom door. I didn't call out. Didn't say, "Honey, I'm home." I just listened. And I heard it. Moaning. Rhythmic. Familiar. At first, my brain refused to register what was happening. I froze. My heart pounded in my ears. Then I heard a voice. Her voice. And a laugh. Then, his. My brother. Jason. I didn't burst in. Didn't yell. I turned and walked out the front door, sat in my car, and stared at the steering wheel for 10 minutes. What they didn't know was that I had been suspecting this for weeks. Amanda had been distant. Jason had been dropping by more often. There were glances I wasn't supposed to notice. Whispers that died when I entered a room. So I prepared. The week before, I installed a small camera in the bedroom, one meant for security, I told myself. Just in case. But I knew what I was really doing. Hoping I was wrong. Praying I was. I wasn't. That night, I watched the footage. Every second. Every noise. Every betrayal. My hands shook, but I didn't cry. Not then. I felt hollow. Like the part of me that trusted the world had been scooped out and tossed into a drain. Amanda was my wife. Jason was my brother. My only brother. We grew up sharing a room, protecting each other from our father's temper, dreaming about someday escaping the hellhole we called home. I guess he escaped first. Right into my marriage. I didn't confront them immediately. I waited. Played dumb. Collected more evidence. I wanted them to know that I knew. That I'd seen everything. That their secret had a face now, mine. When I finally did confront them, it was cold. Surgical. Amanda cried. Jason couldn't even look at me. He mumbled something about it just happening, like they'd tripped and fallen into betrayal. I walked away. No drama. No yelling. Just a quiet, final door closing behind me. They didn't chase me. They never did. And I wouldn't change a thing. Life with Leah moved forward, one gentle step at a time. We moved in together after a year, into a small home on the edge of the woods just outside Fort Collins. It wasn't fancy, 2 bedrooms, creaky floors, a garden overrun with wild mint. But it was ours. It smelled of coffee, dogs, and dried paint. It smelled like healing. I started teaching coding workshops at the local community center. Teenagers mostly. Kids who didn't fit the usual mold. Some with anger issues. Others with broken homes. I saw pieces of myself in every one of them, the pain, the defiance, the longing to be seen. One of the boys, Malik, reminded me of Jason. Brilliant. Charming. Angry at the world. I poured my time into mentoring him. It wasn't about fixing him, it was about helping him see his own value. Watching him graduate the program with tears in his eyes reminded me why I was still here. Leah's parents became my family. Her dad taught me woodworking. Her mom taught me patience. We spent Sunday dinners talking politics, art, and which hiking trails had the best views. For the first time in a decade, I felt like I belonged. Then, one spring morning, Leah found out she was pregnant. She told me on the trail near Horsetooth Reservoir, holding up a tiny pair of hiking boots she'd bought at a thrift store. I cried. Hard. Not out of fear, but because something in me had healed enough to receive joy again. We named her Ava. She was born in a thunderstorm. Tiny, loud, furious at first, then peaceful as soon as Leah held her. Watching them together felt like witnessing a second chance I didn't know I needed. I never told Ava about Amanda or Jason. Not because I was hiding the truth, but because that chapter belonged to another life. Instead, I taught her how to plant tomatoes, how to climb boulders, how to code in Python. We built Lego cities, camped under the stars, and chased elk through snowbanks. Years passed. Ava grew. Leah and I grew stronger. I sold my first painting. We rescued another dog. Then another. Max passed away, old and loved. We buried him under a pine tree behind the house, marked the spot with one of Leah's river stones. One night, after Ava had gone to bed, Leah sat across from me, wine in hand. "Do you ever think about them?" she asked. I didn't need to ask who. "Not really," I said. "But sometimes. I wonder if they ever changed. If they ever understood." She nodded. "I think people like that rarely do." But then she looked at me, smiling. "You did. And that's the difference." The final letter came years later. A thick envelope. No return address. I opened it, curious. It was from Jason. 6 pages. He was sober now. Living in a cabin in Montana. Said he'd found God. Or at least, something like peace. He wrote about his regrets, about our childhood, about the moment he knew he'd lost me for good. He ended it with, "I hope you're happy. You deserve to be." I never did. I didn't write back. I didn't need to. Sometimes silence is the only answer. As Ava turned 10, I watched her run through the woods with her friends, laughing so hard she couldn't breathe. Leah beside me, our hands tangled. This is the life I earned. Some stories start in fire. Mine did. But it ends in light. Ava was 13 the first time she asked about my brother. We were sitting on the porch, late July heat wrapped around us like a wet blanket. The cicadas were deafening. She had just gotten back from a sleepover, a little quieter than usual. She looked at me and said, "Dad, do you have any siblings?" I paused. Not because I didn't know what to say, but because I wasn't sure if it was time. "I had a brother," I said. "We don't talk anymore." She nodded slowly, watching a moth batter itself against the porch light. "Did he hurt you?" That caught me off guard. I nodded. "Yeah. He did." She didn't ask anything else, and I didn't offer more. But something inside me shifted. I had buried Jason and Amanda so deep, I'd convinced myself they were gone. But ghosts have their own clocks. A few weeks later, I got a message request on Facebook. I almost didn't check it. It was from Amanda. Just one sentence, "I heard about Ava. I'm happy for you." No profile picture. No posts. I stared at it for hours before deleting it. Leah noticed something was off. I told her the truth. She didn't say much, just took my hand and squeezed it. But Ava? She was entering that age where the world starts to expand and parents stop being superheroes. She asked more questions. About my past. About regrets. About forgiveness. "Would you ever talk to him again?" she asked one night while we were driving back from her school play. "I don't know," I said honestly. "Some bridges, when they burn, it's for a reason." She looked out the window. "But what if someone's waiting on the other side?" I didn't answer. But her words haunted me. Then, that winter, Jason showed up in town. I saw him at the farmer's market. Older. Gray in his beard. A little thinner. He was with a woman and a child. He didn't see me. Or maybe he did and just chose not to react. I froze. My chest tightened. I wanted to walk up and say something, anything. But instead, I turned away. That night, I told Leah. She said nothing for a long time. Then she said, maybe he's finally carrying his part of the pain. The next week, Jason sent another letter. No return address, just like before. The next week, Jason sent another letter. No return address, just like before. I opened it at the kitchen table, Leah across from me, silently folding laundry. Ava was at her friend's house. The house was quiet. Almost too quiet. The letter was shorter this time. 3 pages. His handwriting was shakier. He wrote about Montana, the isolation, the snow, the quiet that sometimes felt like punishment, sometimes like salvation. He didn't beg. Didn't justify. He wrote. I think about that night more than you probably think I do. The night you found out. I remember how you looked at me, not angry. Just done. That was worse than any punch. He talked about our childhood. How he resented me for being the strong one. For leaving home without looking back. For getting the life he thought he deserved. Then came this. I used to think Amanda was a mistake. But now I know she was a symptom. I wanted to destroy something you loved because I hated myself for not being you. I had to stop reading. My hands were trembling. Leah reached over and covered mine with hers. She didn't ask. Didn't speak. Just anchored me. Later that night, after Ava was asleep, I sat by the fireplace and finished the letter. Jason ended with. If you ever want to talk, I'll be here. I don't expect it. I just hope someday you won't flinch at my name anymore. I didn't sleep well. Memories returned like ghosts, childhood birthdays, broken bones, shared secrets. And then, that one moment that burned them all away. The next morning, I went to the garage and pulled out an old photo album. There we were, 2 boys in matching pajamas, grinning at a Christmas tree. Jason, with a missing front tooth. Me, holding our first dog. It hit me like a punch to the gut. Later that week, I wrote him back. Just a few lines. I'm not ready. But I'm not angry anymore. I don't know what that means, but it's more than nothing. I didn't know if it was forgiveness. But it was something. It was nearly a year before I heard from Jason again. Another letter. This time typed. Tighter. More structured. Less raw. He said he was raising a son, 8 years old. Named Caleb. Not Amanda's. A woman he'd met in recovery who had since passed from cancer. Jason had been raising the boy alone for the past 2 years. He wrote. I know I failed as a brother. I failed as a man. But I'm trying to be a father. And some days, I don't think I'm enough. Some days, he looks at me like he knows everything I've done. I read the letter 3 times. Each word sank heavier than the last. I showed it to Leah. She said, maybe this is the part of the story where you help someone become better than you were. I wasn't sure what that meant. But her voice stayed with me. A few weeks later, I got a phone call from an unknown number. Normally, I wouldn't answer. But something, some thread of fate, made me pick up. Is this Matthew? A small voice asked. Yes. This is Caleb. Jason's son. He told me to call if anything happened. I stood up so fast the chair scraped the floor. My heart dropped into my stomach. What happened? He collapsed. He's in the hospital. In Helena. He gave me your number. Said you were his brother. Said you'd understand. The next morning, I was on a plane. Helena was gray when I landed. Snow flurries in late April. The hospital was small, mountain town small. It smelled like disinfectant and old coffee. Caleb was waiting in the lobby, sitting in an oversized chair with a backpack too big for his frame. He looked up at me, eyes wide, cautious. "You look like him," he said. I didn't know what to say. So I just nodded. "I'm Matt." He nodded back. He said you used to be friends. That word, used to, hit harder than I expected. Jason was in the ICU. He'd had a stroke. Minor, they said, but with complications. Stress. Poor diet. Years of drinking, even if he'd stopped. His face was pale, half his mouth slack. One eye fluttered open when I walked in. "Matt," he croaked. I sat beside him. For a long time, we didn't speak. Just breathed the same air. Finally, he whispered, "You came." I did. He closed his eyes. "I didn't expect you to." I looked at the man in the bed, my brother, my betrayer, a father now clinging to life. And for the first time in years, I didn't feel rage. I felt something else. Pity. Maybe. Love. Maybe that too. Caleb needed someone. Jason might not make it. I had a choice to make. Later that evening, I stepped outside, called Leah. Told her everything. She didn't hesitate. "If that boy needs a place," she said, "he has one." I cried, quietly, behind the hospital, snow melting on my jacket. Jason was discharged a week later, weak but stable. He couldn't live alone, not for a while. And Caleb couldn't care for him. So I brought them both home. Leah didn't flinch. Ava, now 16, was more skeptical. But she gave Caleb her old Nintendo Switch and showed him where we kept the cookies. That was enough for him. Jason stayed in the guest room. We set up medical equipment, a new mattress. I helped him shower. Fed him. Watched the humiliation crawl across his face like a shadow he couldn't outrun. "I deserve worse," he muttered once as I adjusted his pillows. "Maybe," I said. "But Caleb doesn't." And that became our rhythm. The pain belonged to us, but the boy didn't. At night, Jason and I talked. More than we ever had as adults. About Mom. About Dad. About the time he almost drowned and I pulled him out. About Amanda. He cried once. Said, "I wish I'd loved you like a brother instead of envying you like a rival." I didn't say anything. Just stayed in the room, letting silence do what words couldn't. Weeks passed. Jason got stronger. Leah taught Caleb to bake banana bread. Ava let him hang out with her friends. Then one day, Jason walked out onto the porch without help. Looked at the mountains. Turned to me. "If I die tomorrow, I'll die having been your brother again." I nodded. "You already are." Jason lived for another 3 years. He never fully recovered. There were good days, and there were days when he couldn't lift a spoon. But he tried. Every single day, he tried. He taught Caleb how to fish in the little creek behind our house. He built birdhouses with Ava. He laughed more. Smiled wider. Became a man I wished I had known long ago. One evening, we sat out back, a fire pit crackling between us. The stars were out, Ava and Caleb roasting marshmallows nearby. Jason looked over at me and said, "You didn't owe me this." "I know," I said. "But you gave it anyway." He nodded, eyes glistening. "I spent most of my life breaking things. You built something." Ava looked up. "He's right, Dad." That was the last full conversation we had. Jason passed in his sleep 3 months later. Peacefully. Caleb was the one who found him. I held the boy for hours that day, whispering truths I wished someone had told us when we were young. At the funeral, I spoke. Not as a brother who was betrayed. But as a man who forgave. Who rebuilt. He hurt me, I said. But he also healed me. In the end, he chose love. And I'm grateful for that. Years passed. Caleb stayed with us. We adopted him formally. He took our last name. Ava called him her bonus brother. They bickered like real siblings. Grew up side by side. Now, I sit here, writing this with a mug of cold coffee and a heart that doesn't ache the way it used to. Some stories begin with fire. Mine did. But in the end, it wasn't about the burning. It was about what survived.